sing Sweet to Me, a song by Florence Dore from her soon-to-be-released album, Highways and Rocket Ships. Born and raised in Nashville, Florence lives in North Carolina with her husband, Will Rigby, and their daughter, Georgie. In addition to being a singer-songwriter, Florence has authored several books, is professor of American literature at UNC-Chapel Hill, and serves on the board of the Bob Dylan Institute. That's a busy schedule, but Florence carved out some time to talk about it all. You're listening to Frets with DJ Fey. No lessons, no technique info. I just talk to people who play guitar. Stay tuned. Florence, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, you were born in Nashville, but are now in North Carolina. How much of your early years did you spend in Nashville?
Well, I was born there, and I lived there until middle school when my parents split up, and we moved with my mom to Washington, D.C., but then we would go back for the summers and holidays to be with my dad. So it was Nashville, and then it was D.C. and Nashville. I definitely consider Nashville my home. My mother's from there. Her mother's from Centerville, Tennessee, actually, which is outside of Nashville. But I think she moved when she was pretty young out from the country into Nashville. So actually, the second song on my new record, Highways and Rocket Ships, is told from my grandmother's point of view. And it's sort of it's an elegy to her, but it definitely details some of that Tennessee background.
At what point did you start playing music and learning instruments?
Yeah, so I picked up a guitar and learned how to play when I was pretty young. I think I was 7. And there was my house always seemed to just have random crap everywhere. And there was a book, I can still visualize it. I wonder if it's in my mother's house now somewhere. It's like a Xerox book of chords to, I guess, traditional songs. So Libby Cotton's Freight Train was in that book, and I learned how to play that. That's the first song I learned to play. And yeah, I was really little. I have a book coming out sometime in the next year called The Ink and the Grooves, Conversations about Literature and Rock and Roll. And in the introduction to that book, I've got interviews in there with Lucinda Williams and Steve Earle and Don Flemons, and an essay by Richard Thompson that he wrote about ballads.
I love
and
Richard
about
Thompson.
Yeah, he's amazing. About one ballad. Anyway, so that book, I do an sort of autobiographical introduction in that book, in which I talk about my own dual interests in literature and rock and roll. And one of the things I talk about is being, I don't know how old I was, around 4 or 5, and being arrested in my house in Nashville by the sound of the Nas in The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down by the band. And so I listened to music from a really early age. One of the points of the introduction of that book is that people in my generation, people who are kind of young with respect to rock and roll, kind of learned how to write and listen to rock and roll music at the same time. The introduction is called Needles and Pens, because one of the interviews I do actually is with Amy Helm, and she's a little younger than I am, but you know, Jonathan Lethem, who's a novelist who's really interested in rock and roll, he's in there. Dana Spiotta, another novelist. All of us born, you know, around the mid 60s and a little later had the experience of learning rock from our parents, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm married to Will Rigby, and he was not introduced to rock and roll by his parents by any stretch. he remembers, like everyone in his generation who became a musician, he remembers watching the Ed Sullivan Show. But for me and for people in my generation who grew up to be in bands and to be working musicians, we learned it from our parents.
Right.
Records were there just all over the house. And one of the songs on my new record, which is an homage to my mother and all of her dysfunctional glory, is called Rebel Debutante. And one of the lines in the song is ERA and Dylan on the radio. Just all that stuff was around. It was just in Nashville in the late 60s and early 70s. Richard Altman was down there making Nashville. It was just all over the place. It was ubiquitous, popular music.
If you're a podcast addict like me, you might have thought about starting your own. I'm having a lot of fun creating and sharing my podcast, Frets with DJ Fey. It seemed daunting at first, and I had no idea how to proceed after recording my first episodes. Then I discovered Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout has helped over 100,000 people, even knuckleheads like me, launch a podcast. The tools they provide make it incredibly easy to get your thing going. They'll also help you get your podcast into all the major podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. You get a great-looking website, audio players to drop into other websites, analytics, and tools to promote your podcast. To get a no-risk free trial of Buzzsprout, or to find out about their low-cost monthly plan options, follow the link in today's show notes and let them know that DJ Fey sent you. Learn the ins and outs of podcasting through people who eat, drink, and breathe it. Buzzsprout, the easiest way to start a podcast. Now, back to mine. Well, when did you first belong to or form or join any bands?
Yeah, so in college.
Okay.
My boyfriend, Oz, at the time, actually the character Oz in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, we went to school with Joss Whedon. So
oh, wow.
It's based on us. So,
really?
But mostly Oz. Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
So he and I had a band in college, and then moved to Boston from college, and between junior and senior year, I think, and played around Boston after that, and broke up and started playing with other people too.
Yeah. So time goes on, and then you're a working musician. And you're playing cities like Boston and New York and Cleveland, and also out on the West Coast in San Francisco, right?
Yeah. So when I was in Boston, I went there directly after college and was just working and playing, and mostly playing. And I was going out with Joe Harvard, who co-founded Fort Apache Studios in Boston. Joe and I lived in Fort Apache Studios briefly.
Oh, wow.
But we broke up. He's a mess. And so I broke up with him, and I was in grad school at the time and transferred out to Berkeley. And so I went out there and so joined bands with just various people, but the only ones you might have heard of would be members of the Catheads, who were a really good band, 90s band from San Fran. So it was great. So playing out there was good. I did always end up going back to New York and playing in New York because my guitar player from Perfect City, who I had gone to college with, though he had a different band in college. I was playing with Oz, and Chris had different bands, Chris Erickson. But he was very plugged into the New York music scene. He was playing with Matt Keating and other people there. And so I would just journey back to New York and play with him. Wow. And actually, sometime during grad school, I went to New York. I sent this is actually funny. I was trying to get signed, and I wanted to get signed by E Squared, Steve Earle's label in Nashville. So I sent my cassette demo.
Cassettes.
To Nashville, and got a call back from somebody at his label, and they wanted to see us. So we went down to Nashville. Actually, this involves Will Rigby. He claims this is where we met. He's probably right. But anyway, we went down with Dyken to Nashville and played some shows. And there was a huge festival there at the time. And I don't know what it was. I'm pretty sure it wasn't the Americana Fest. I don't think that existed then. was like 97, I think. Anyway, whenever E Squared was flourishing. And so we went to play, and Will was down there playing with Sherry Knight on that amazing record from E Squared, Northeast Kingdom. And so we went to see them and gave Will a ride somewhere else. And yeah, now we're married.
That's where it all began.
Yeah. Hey, this is Florence Dore. You're listening to Frets with DJ Fey.
Well, Will is, not only been in some of my favorite bands like the DBs and Steve Earle and the Dukes. He did a stint. He played with Matthew Sweet for a stretch. Yeah,
he did. I think he spent a year, as far as I remember him telling me. I wasn't going out with him then, but yeah, he was on the road with him, with Matthew Sweet.
I think I met Will after a Steve Earle show many, many years ago at the Exit Inn. Some buddies of mine, it was a bachelor party weekend. I've told this story on another episode of this show. Well, I told part of the story, but what I didn't mention was after the show at the Exit Inn, a few of us sort of staggered over across the street to the end, the bar over there, hoping, that maybe, because we knew that, I guess the word was that sometimes bands would, saunter over there after a show. Anyway, I don't think Steve Earle showed up, but Will did. The reason I know that Will did come over was the guest of honor, my buddy who was a drummer and a guitar player. He was a huge fan of your husband Will, and he but he regrets this to this day. He said, I don't know what I said to him. I was probably just babbling incoherently and probably made a fool of myself. Anyway.
No. Aww.
It's kind of a funny little story.
Yeah, that's great.
Anyway, well, and speaking of the DBs, I know Peter Holsapel's in your band.
Yeah, well, he played on my record. And yeah, so having Will and Peter play on the record was incredible because, Peter actually, he not only played on the record, he kind of, I would say he's a mentor. He's a friend. I mean, he and Will are best friends and they live here, but he really kind of, I would say, mentored me back into playing music after a long time away. I had the songs but I did a bunch of gigs with him, and he, before I added the rest of the band, just Peter and I had done a few shows, quite a few actually, in which he just really was incredibly supportive and also just was showing me how to edit songs. And so, so having him in the band was just so instructive, and having Will and Peter in the band was, I was also a huge DB's fan. So now they're a big part of the record and a big part of how it sounds. So I feel really incredibly lucky. Don Dixon and Mitch Easter Mitch recorded it, Don produced it. So, and those guys all go way back to, to the REM days. And, so yeah, I just feel incredibly like it's been, exciting and wonderful to make this second record, but it's also been kind of a re-education. So having, one of the DBification things that happened is there's a song on the record called Lighter, and it wasn't really done when we went to record. And so we had 2 long rehearsals before going into the studio. And after a rehearsal and a half, we were pretty done. We didn't want to overplay the song. So we had a little time to play with. And so I was like, all right, well, let's see if I can finish this song and show it to you guys. And Will did something that I think of as really classic DBs, just draw. And Peter also was encouraging me to do stuff like this when I was like workshopping the songs with him, basically. But Will's like, let's drop a measure from this song, from this part of the song. And I just was like, no, that sounds terrible. Like, that just sounds really fucking weird. And Jeremy Chatsky, the bass player, was like, no, it sounds really good. And I was like, no. And Peter was just like, just go sleep on it, Florence. Just why don't you go sleep on it? And then by the time we actually recorded it, it was like, oh yeah, that's such a better, it's just really cool. It's really great. And so, yeah, Will has a co-write on that song because, and I do think it's a kind of, yeah, it's just the influence of those two members of the DBs. It was definitely, to me, palpable just because I took advice in various ways. And that's the most obvious one. But yeah, it's really great having them to help me out.
Those vocals are Florence Dore with Peter Holsapple on a new song, Lighter, written with her husband, Will Rigby. It's from the upcoming album produced by Florence and Don Dixon and mixed by Mitch Easter. Yeah, and Mark Spencer of Sunvolt, he's part of this?
Yeah, he's wonderful. I'm trying to think, I've known Mark a really long time, probably just from being around New York, and I did some Gowanus All-Stars show with this guy Spike Priggin, and he was on that, but he's also he's friends with a lot of friends of mine in New York, and so yeah, he was just a natural fit, he and Jeremy together for the second guitarist, so yeah.
Yeah, I don't know Mark, but I recently had John Horton on the show, and John's now with
awesome
Sunvolt. It was great. It was great to talk with him.
Yeah, great.
The other one, Jeremy.
We opened for Sunvolt on my birthday, actually.
Oh
here.
Wow! Oh, that's
and
cool.
So
very cool.
Yeah. So I met those guys. Yeah.
And Jeremy Chutsky he played with Springsteen.
He did that folk album, and I guess a tour with them. And he said he's as nice as you might imagine.
That's quite a band you have there.
Thank you. I feel very excited about it. Yeah, they're really good.
Yeah. Well, I love your album, Perfect City. It's one that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's one that a friend of mine, when he first told me, or we were talking about you and connections to other people, but anyway, yeah, I got it and gave it a listen, and seriously, I'm not saying this for your benefit. I don't do this often. I don't often, play things. I play something, then I come back to it. But yeah, for some reason, I had been listening to it like, in the car and stuff like that. And I was like, I want to hear that again. I was like giving it multiple plays. So it was
a
really
high compliment.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Thank you.
Really nice.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. There's a track
it feels old now.
Oh yeah, that's old news.
Yeah. Ready for this Highways and Rocket Ships to come out. But yeah, no, I love the record. I stand behind it. So.
Yeah. Well, there's a track on it, Christmas, and that was included on that Geffen compilation, which I love the name of the Just Say Noel.
Yeah, that was cool. In my Boston days, when I was going out with Joe Harvard, I played with somebody named Chris Toppin, and her band was Fuzzy. So, but that was after I moved away. When I was living there, she and I played my song Christmas, and then when I left, I guess she played it with her band, and they got signed. I think they were in Tag Atlantic briefly, and they opened for the Posies on a tour, and so they liked it. And when they were asked to do a Christmas song, they did my song, which was a real honor. I love the Posies.
I did too. I did a poster for them a few years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they did a series of like pop-up in-store record store shows. And I have some friends. I know the guys at Euclid Records here in town, and they asked. I get asked occasionally to do some graphics and stuff for. Anyway, I did a poster for that pop-up show, and and the members of the band signed it. So yeah,
that's exciting. They're a great band.
They are. first recorded version of Christmas by Florence Dore appeared on the Geffen holiday compilation Just Say Noel and was performed by the Posies. Florence recorded the song for her album Perfect City in 2001. Same old things I keep telling myself. Well, we talked about your music, but you are also an English professor at the University of North Carolina.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Let's see, I want to say 4 years ago now, when I kind of came back to music, I should back up and say I wrote a book in 2018 called Novel Sounds, Southern Fiction in the Age of Rock and Roll. And so it was great being married to a musician. Will was on tour with Steve Earle a lot when we had a baby, which, that was hard. So we had fun, Georgie and I going out and going on the road with them some, but it didn't really leave a lot of room for me to go on tour and be a working musician. I didn't want to be that kind of mom, actually. I wanted to be around for my daughter. And so she's 16, so this is all working out time-wise. Like, she's ready for me to get out of her face. So I'm like obliging by going back on tour. So, but as she got older, my research as an academic turned to vernacular music, which is, I just don't think it's a coincidence at all. So I couldn't stay away from music very much, really. So the academia brought me back to music, and then getting back into music that way, I got drawn back into the craft and writing songs. So what happened was Steve told me about this book. I was writing on something else, Southern fiction I was writing on, but then Steve told me about this biography of Leadbelly, and I was reading it and my eyes popped out of my head when I read that John Lomax had brought Leadbelly to the MLA in 1934. The MLA is just like I think really living hell for any academic who has any iota of cool in them. It's just a total bummer, but it's the largest meeting of literature professors in the whole world, and you have to do it once a year, and you go, and it's like a bunch of meetings and whatever. But Leadbelly was there in 1934, so I started thinking, well, what does literature actually have to do with vernacular music? And then I started researching it, and it turns out like you can go back to Chaucer. The Canterbury Tales are based on ballads, and ballads were overlapping with literature the whole time, it turns out. And so examining that ballad history and how it kind of transmogrified with country and electricity and blues and stuff into what became rock and roll, like that happening at the same time as the establishment of Southern literature as a field, I found really interesting. So about that time, so I wrote the book. I did conferences here and at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, actually, in 2010 as I was working it out. But on rock and literature, and started writing songs again. And around that time, the DBs are really good friends with this guy Jefferson Holt.
Oh yeah,
in
the early
manager,
REM days.
That's right. And so he was around, and he came to my conferences which, Steve was at the conference. Richard Thompson came, Greil Marcus and Peter Veronik, and then a bunch of novelists. It was very wonderful. And Jefferson came, and we he and Will are old friends, but he and I started becoming friends, and we're thinking about things we might do together. Sarah Romweber's death led him to reach out to ask me to do maybe a what do you call that? A oral history of North Carolina musicians. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. And so we're just sort of casting around things to do together, projects, and had been doing that for a while. And then was like, well, he said, oh, you have a record, right? And I was like, yeah. So I gave him Perfect City, and, it's an old record. It's been around for a long time. And I thought, okay, great, whatever. And then he texted me, he's just like, fuck. One word text. I was like, oh, I guess he likes the record. That's cool. So as we kept talking, I was like, what I really want to do, Jefferson, is make another record. And he said, well, let's do that. And so he's just been this incredible support person. He's really interested in the fact that I'm sort of middle-aged woman, and the point of view that I'm bringing. I have a song on Highways and Rocket Ships called "And the Lady Goes." It's about menopause. It's a pop song. That's like a very Janglesy DB's-esque kind of song too. So Jefferson's he's very open and interested, and so he's really ushered me into back into music. And so actually Novel Sounds, the book, has been just this wonderful catalyst to bring me back into being a working musician again. And at the same time, Bland Simpson, who's a member of this band, the Red Clay Ramblers, who's been around here for, 30 years, forever. And he's a colleague of mine. We have a creative writing program here, and there's a music minor, a songwriting minor. So he's had me teaching songwriting classes over the last 3 years. So it's been incredible. So I get to really actually do both things at UNC. So I feel pretty psyched about that, pretty happy.
That's great. What if it was possible to get local fresh groceries delivered right to your front door? You could take up guitar lessons with all that free time. I know a guy. Or learn the tuba. I don't give tuba lessons, but my point is, you'll have the extra time. Instacart gives you unlimited grocery delivery for one low monthly fee. That's way better than the other guys that nickel and dime you every time you use their app. Forget that one ingredient you need to make Aunt Bess's spaghetti sauce? Ugh, more frustrating than a broken B string. Instacart can deliver that that ingredient right to your front door faster than a Roy Clark guitar solo. You can shop multiple stores, find deals and offers in your area to help you save money, and every item is hand-selected by shoppers based on your preferences. No more rock-hard avocados, and they'll keep that carton of eggs safe from cracking, too. To start a 14-day free trial, follow the link in today's show notes to let Instacart know that DJ Fey, that's me, sent you, and to help support Frets with DJ Fey. And remember, stay tuned. Well, a lot of great music seems to have come out of Chapel Hill. I remember I was really into, you mentioned Sarah Rahmhuber, which is so sad, but yeah, I used to go see Flat Duo Jets in like some really small clubs around here. And that's somebody that he's on my list to reach out to. I'd love to have Dexter on the show.
Dexter, you should.
Yeah.
That'd be great. I have his email. I'd be glad to share it with you.
Cool.
And he did, when I returned to music, when Jefferson kind of came in the picture and was supporting me in getting back to this endeavor, we set up a tour and a recording date to do a single. And Mark and Jeremy came down and we rehearsed and, did a tour, and then went and recorded a single. And that was March 7th, 2020. So we were making jokes about touching our faces in the van. And, then they went home and everything shut down, right? The pandemic shut everything down. So I still just had so much excitement about music and so much momentum. So while we were rehearsing and trying to figure out what cover to do for the tour, Peter had suggested this Marshall Crenshaw song called Somewhere Down the Line. It is so beautiful. And, I wanted to come out swinging. So we did Patty Griffin's Silver Bells as a cover instead.
Nice.
I wanted to play electric guitar for that.
Yeah.
So, but then when the pandemic hit, I was really drawn again to that song. It's so comforting, somewhere down the line. It's going to be more than fine. These days will never cross our mind, somewhere down the line. It's just so pretty. And so we recorded it. I decided I wanted to keep going. And so, Peter dropped with his mask and his gloves, some equipment off in the front, which we wiped down with bleached, paper towels. And got on FaceTime and figured out how to record Will's drums. We now have a studio. Since then, we've kind of upgraded our spare room into an actual studio. So, but at the time, we were just like the living room. And so we recorded, he and I, this acoustic guitar and drums, and sent the tracks to Don. And Don sent them on to the other members of the band. Peter and Mark and Jeremy gave their tracks. He mixed it, sounded cool. And I was like, well, what the fuck are we going to do with this? And so, meantime, I had been really anxious to play at the Cradle, was setting things up for that. And, started to worry, like, Jesus, is the Cradle going to close? Like, are all these venues going to close?
Yeah.
Like, what's going to happen? So I just got really scared, and it came up with the idea, sort of brainstorming with a bunch of people around here, to make a record called Cover Charge and get a bunch of North Carolina musicians to record covers.
That's
and
cool.
Put it out. Yeah, it was great. And it had, the DBs contributed. The Kinks, I'm on an Island. They actually already had a recording.
I love the Kinks.
Really beautiful.
I love that song.
Fun, great cover. Southern Culture offered us that Can Heat song, Let's Work Together, which is actually a great song, but it's by a North Carolina musician named Thalbert Harrison, I believe. Better look that up. But anyway, and then I got together with these guys who were part of Mammoth Records here, Steve Balcom and Lane Worcester. And they knew this entertainment lawyer, Sean Nolan, who represents a lot of the bigger artists here. So the four of us joined forces and created this record, just sold it on Bandcamp. The Superchunk did this amazing version of Can't Stop the World by the Go-Go's. So anyway, it did remarkably well. It charted on the Billboard charts. It just was like, oh my God. So it made a lot of money for the Cradle. And
that's great.
Yeah, it was really like, it was a way for me to connect with North Carolina musicians as a person returning to music. I've been around, I'm in the scene, my husband plays, but to actually as a musician re-enter the music world, it was a way to connect with North Carolina musicians doing that. So it's been really, it was great. It was a great way to keep things going in a scary time. And luckily, we're in a bit of a happier time now. So.
Good. Well, I'm making a mental note that I really want to get that covers album.
Cover Charge.
Cover Charge.
Right to Bandcamp. It's really terrific. It's
cool.
Sold, I can't remember how many copies, but I mean, whatever, a lot.
Yeah.
To chart. It's like #1 on the Billboard compilation charts.
That's very, very cool.
And it came in at other numbers on the chart. But then, right. And we were going to actually record Highways and Rocket Ships remotely in that same way because we thought we had to. But then the vaccine came and it was like, okay. So we sort of delayed until we could get together safely in Kernersville at Mitch Easter Studio. And I think we were the first band back. They were closed. But anyway, so Don came down and we did the record and got that done before the Delta variant reared its ugly head. Nobody got sick. It was fantastic. We made the record. And then, and now we're just waiting for the vinyl delay. Caused by a variety of things. So, but we're finally ready to get a release date from the vinyl manufacturer because we have a test pressing, which sounds really good from a great place in Georgia, and so we're going to have a release date really soon, which is exciting.
Great, I'm looking forward.
Can't be stopped.
Yeah,
Highways and Rocket Ships just cannot be stopped. There have been so many delays. I can't actually believe it.
Wow. Isn't it crazy, though, that, more and more people are recording that way? Like, and you just Dropbox or Hightail files to somebody else and pass it around.
I will say, like teaching, like being in the classroom, going into the studio makes you realize just exactly how much you're missing by not being in person.
Oh, yeah.
It's just kind of, there's a magic that happens when you're all together.
Sure.
That is just, recording is fun and you can do all these different things, but there is some sort of, again, ineffable kind of magic that takes place. And same with teaching. It's just like, oh yeah, that was okay, but this is great, right? Something in the air, right?
Right.
Ideas, music, just sort of, there's a melding and an emotion, really.
Yeah.
That just can't, you can't get it technologically, remotely.
Well, you did serve on the board at the Bob Dylan Institute. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. I do. Yeah. It was a real honor to be invited to do that. And there's a book of collected essays that came out on Bob Dylan's birthday from like Cambridge University Press or some incredibly highfalutin press, called Dylan at 80. And I got asked to write the Dylan and American Literature piece, which was really, really an honor as well.
Nice.
So got to speak at the launch of that. It was a remote conference at the Institute, but yeah, I'm really excited to be a part of that.
Very cool. Well, Florence, I really appreciate you doing this, and it was great. This was great to talk to you.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Singer, songwriter, guitarist, author, professor, devoted wife and mother, Florence Dore. By the way, this beautiful closing chorus on Sweet to Me from the new album is sung by her sister Catherine and her teenage daughter, Georgie. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to visit FlorenceDoreMusic.com. It's in today's show notes. I hope you'll join me next time on Frets. Stay tuned.